Hello, in this video I want to show you a very powerful map that comes with 3ds Max by default that you may not even know about. So if we go into Material Editor or press M, and here I have my standard materials, VR materials, and right over here we have substance. I can double click on this, and I can then double click here to see the parameters here on the right. Now you may have heard of a couple of programs called Substance Designer and Substance Painter. This is derived from that same system. The whole theory behind these substances is that in order to properly convey a material, a realistic material, you need a combination of various maps. Diffuse, reflection, gloss, emissive, displacement, bump, and more. So in order to load up a substance, simply click on Load Substance. And these are the two folders that come with 3ds Max by default. We have noises and textures. And this is where you can find them. So let's try, for example, concrete tiles. We get a number of different channels here: diffuse, specular, normal, bump, displacement, and height. So in order to actually use these channels, we can create an actual material. So for example, I'll just start with standard. And now what I can do is simply click and drag the diffuse into the diffuse color. Now notice here we get an intermediate map here, and if I double click on here, it's called Map Output Selector. So a substance comes with various outputs, various channels, which we can see right here. So this is kind of necessary to transfer between substance and a standard material. Next we have specular, which I'll plug into specular level, not color. You can also double click here to see a larger version of the image. Zoom in a little bit. And next we have normal. Now for normal, before I plug it in here, I first want to create a normal bump and plug this into bump, and then plug normal into here, normal. Now next we have bump, displacement, and height. Don't be fooled by their names. They actually all can serve as displacement maps. Bump covers smaller details. Displacement is for larger, more general details, and height is a combination of both bump and displacement. Which one you use depends on what your system resources are. For example, if I don't want to have any displacement, I can just take the bump map and plug it into additional bump right here. So this normal bump map actually has two slots here, normal and additional bump. And if I want to decrease the strength, I can do so right here on the right. I can make it 0.5 for example. We also have some options for different normal maps such as tangent, local XYZ, screen world. We can also flip the red, flip the green, and swap red and green. I can double click here on the standard material, go into maps, and actually increase the strength of the bump map. Sometimes it's actually a good idea to keep the strength a little bit lower because you want to have a very subtle effect. Having a bump map that's too high can cause a very ugly looking effect. So now I can create a basic plane. I'll just activate grid points and snap it right here in the grid. And now I will select not the substance but the material and apply. And since I'm using V-Ray, I'll just create a quick light here. And I'll rotate it here and move it up. And here is a render of the concrete tiles. Now you may be wondering what's so special about substance. You can simply find a texture anywhere and do the same thing. But the thing is that if I double click on substance, we have a number of options here which are unique for every substance. There are some which are shared between all substances. All the values down here are shared, but the values up here are unique to this concrete tiles. So what I can do is I can just change the concrete color. I can change the random seed, which will just add some nice variety to the texture. I can sharpen it, add stains or remove stains, and change the number of tiles. I'll just keep it at 4 for now. And the great thing about this is that when I change a value here, all of the maps that are relevant to this value will be updated. So for example, if I double click on this and double click on this to make it larger, you can see we have tiles here and here. So this is diffuse and this is normal. But when I change the number of tiles to, let's say, 6, notice how both the normal map and the diffuse map are updated. So this gives you quick and simple control over various maps. All you need to do is change one or two values here to get a different result. So here on the right is my previous result, and here's the new result. Now I can still use these maps in custom setups. So for example, I can still create a composite map. And I can plug this into layer 1. And now I can create a new layer. And let's say I create a checker map. And I plug this into layer 2. And I'll set this to be, let's say, multiply. So now the black parts of this checker will multiply, and they will give this a darker effect on the texture. And I can also halve the opacity. And I will change the checker settings here. Increase the tiling. And now, of course, I want to plug this into diffuse. And I'll make a new render. And here is my new render with the checker map, adding a nice variety to the substance. So when you're working with substance, you don't have to just use the default channels here. You can, of course, customize it and add your own setup here using composite and all the other maps available, as well as custom bitmaps that you have. So this all seems pretty simple so far. So let's take it a step further. I'll just select all these nodes, hold shift, and clone it down. And now all I have to do is double click here and change the substance. Let's try something like autumn leaves. And I will just delete this and replug the diffuse into the diffuse for the material. Here you notice we also have a new channel, opacity. I can plug the opacity from here to here. Now sometimes the nodes can get very chaotic here, so I can right click, layout children. And now what I will do is close all these renders. I'll press Ctrl V to clone this and move it up just a little bit. And I will apply this new material to the cloned object. And I'll do a quick render. Alright, and we can see that the leaves completely cover the plane. So even though I properly plugged in opacity into opacity, notice how the opacity map is completely white. And that is because if I go into substance, you can see that the density is set to 0.7, which is very high. So let's try 0.01. And notice how all of the maps now update. Diffuse, and specular level, and opacity, and normal map are all updated. So now I will re-render, and here are our updated leaves. So you can already start to see the power of these substances and how they can quickly allow you to detail and texture your scenes right out of the box. And this can also help you to achieve a number of effects. Let's say that in your scene it's the beginning of autumn, and you want to see what it's like once more leaves have fallen on the ground. What you can simply do is go back to the autumn leaf settings and increase the density to, let's say, 0.03. All the maps have been updated. I'll make a clone and re-render. And here's the new render. And just like that, we have more leaves on the ground. Now not only can you increase the density, you can also change the leaf type. So you can have maple, chestnut, oak, and more. I will also decrease the shadow setting because the light is already casting a shadow. I can also increase the color variation. I can also increase the season. If I hover over this, we can see a smaller description. The change of season from spring to autumn. So what I can do is set this from 0.5 to, let's say, 0.8. And the leaves have become redder. A lot of these settings go from 0 to 1. So if I try to enter something like 555, notice it just caps at 1. And now I'll make a clone and re-render. And here we have the red and orange hues indicating that we are further in autumn. And now I'll just decrease the density back to 0.01. And I will delete these renders. So one thing you may notice is that on the edges of this plane we have this cutoff effect happening, where the leaves are just being directly cut off, which can interfere with the illusion of reality that you may want to achieve. So I'll show you a simple way that you can get rid of this cutoff effect. In the material editor, I can select this right here and then click on Show Shaded Material in Viewport. And here it is right here. And now you can either apply Edit Poly, and you can use the Cut tool to cut away the cut portions of the mesh. So let's say right here, then you can select these polygons and delete. And now the cutoff portion will no longer be rendered. What you can also do is apply something like Tessellate or Turbo Smooth. So I've set this to, let's say, 5 iterations. And now you can apply Edit Poly, switch to Polygon Level, and change the selection to the bottom one here, Paint Selection. And now what you can do is simply select the polygons where the cutoff is happening and delete. And now you can see with the new render, unlike in the old render where we have these very obvious cutoff texture effect, here we get these much better and more realistic looking leaves. Now let's say that you want to have more leaves here without having to go back into the editor. What you can simply do is clone this, move it up a little bit, and then rotate it. And now there's more leaves here without needing to change any settings. So just these leaves could be useful in a number of situations. Let's say, for example, that you're doing architectural visualization and you want to see what your buildings, your architecture looks like over the course of a year, and you want to present that to a client. Or let's say that you're designing an environment for a video game and you want to quickly fill the ground with leaves. Just select the ground, clone it, and apply a new substance material, and there are your leaves. And you can quickly change the density, color, and even the type of leaves. So this was a quick introduction to using substances in 3ds Max. In the next video I'll show you even more options and things that you can do with it. Thank you for watching, and take care.